Welcome, everyone. Season 4, Runners Roundtable. And this is a particularly special season because it's going to feature different conversations with runners, female runners from our running community that are doing amazing things. The voice that you're going to hear today, or if you're watching this, the person you're going to see, someone that joined me in season 2 when I had conversations with coaches. So it's so great to have you back as a runner with that hat on. And my guest today is Ally Rae Pesta. And I'm smiling. I'm so excited because now we can add author to what you do. And we're going to get into your book, and you're going to kind of talk us through how this whole process of writing a book came together, publishing a book came together, and the topic of your book, which, fair warning, it is a challenging book to read, and I'll let Ally Rae I'll let you explain that. But before we even get to that, remind us who you are, what you do, and how you came to this wonderful sport of running.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie. I am so delighted to be back, and it just feels like a full circle moment from when we last talked to now. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. As Stephanie mentioned, my name's Ally Rae Pesta, and I have so much I can say about like who I am and what I do. And I think something that really just like comes to me is this theme of empowerment, which I know you and I talked about in a previous episode, but who I am as a person is just here to use my story, use my journey, and also connect with others to empower people. I've had a variety of wild different things that have happened, which we'll get into with the book. But it's all led me to do different things in my life. So from that, and my experience, I became a yoga teacher because yoga helped me so much, which then led me to become a run coach, now an eating disorder and intuitive eating coach, recovery intuitive eating coach, and now a published author, which is wild to say. But I think at the end of the day, like our stories, our titles, they matter, but they're not us. Like they're pieces of us, but they don't define us. At the end of the day, I'm just a 27, soon to be 28-year-old girl living my life and just being there for people, showing up, loving people. And I think who I am is just empowering people, making sure they feel seen, heard, and loved. So I think that kind of summarizes who I am. Yes, the titles are great, but that's a bit about who I am and how I got into running. I started running when I was 8. And I talk about this too in the book. I learned to run with my dad. He was a big runner, always ran. And I was like, I'm just in awe. One day I was like, I want to run with you. And he's like, why? I was like, I'm going to run a mile. I'm going to do it. And the feeling of running, the feeling of like my feet on the ground and the repetitive motion. And I was always an anxious kid growing up. And it was the first time that I felt peace and silence in my mind. And so for me, running has always been a form of therapy. It's definitely evolved. I think I got run coaches for the first time and incredible humans, but I realized like it took away the therapy aspect of it. I haven't ran in a while, dealing with hip surgery and whatnot, but really excited to get back to running. But for me, again, running is just therapy. It's a way to clear my mind. And it's really a way for me to get into my body and out of my head.
That's how I feel about running too. And that is something that you mentioned in the book. So before I kind of bring that in, can you tell us the name of your book and how it even came together? Like how did it come together? Because I feel like when I talked to you earlier this year, I didn't know you were writing a book, right? So I'm like, when I got your email saying, hey, I've written a book, I was like, wait, what? Like, and I feel like my response to you was all like capital letters and exclamation points, because I'm like, yes, like do this amazing stuff in the world. So how did this whole book come together? What was the writing process like for you? And how did you how did you come up with the title for the book?
Yeah. Oh, so many good questions. I'll start with like why. Well, I'll bring the title, but we'll get back to like the title and what it was actually titled something different before it is the title now. So the title is called Beyond My Body, Recovering from a Complex Eating Disorder, Reclaiming Movement, and Finding My Worth. And similar to running, I think writing is the next in kin. I get goosebumps talking about it, that those two things are like always have been so true for me and to me. I started writing probably when I was 5, the earliest of ages I could remember. I would write my mom like speeches in this little journal, and she'd be doing laundry and be like, Mom, I have a speech about heaven. She's like, what? Like, what is going on with this girl? So I just love to write. I see the world through stories. I love to learn about people's stories. I just see the world through words, and it helps me make sense of my own world and what's going on around me. So I always said one day I'd love to write a book. And I didn't know what it would be about, but I just knew in my heart, one day I want to write a book. And then when I was 17, I got diagnosed with my eating disorder. And my first hospital stay, I hadn't written in forever. My disorder took away that from me. Like I didn't have thoughts in my head to be able to write. And my sister, so the 4th day I was allowed wheelchair rides. And my sister took me to the gift shop and she's like, hey, Allison, how about we get you this journal? It was this journal that said like, it's one of those knock journals, and it has like quotes on the left side and then you can write. And it had this little glass, and it was like glass full, glass half empty, spilled over all the way down. So it was cool as a way for me to just like slowly get back into writing, and not as intimidating of a way of just an empty page. And I started writing again in the hospital, especially after meals or anything to kind of just calm my mind, to calm my hands. And one of my first journal entries, I said, I'm going to write a book about this one day. And from that moment, I knew that I didn't know when, but one day I wanted to write a book. And since then, I've been writing like a lot of different stories, and I have all my journals and journal entries from the hospital stays, from recovery, from all of the process. And I do think, though, there was a lot of pressure on myself. I remember vividly, my friend Emma, she's a main character in the book, has been a huge part of my life. But I remember vividly going on hikes with her. She's a big dreamer. And I'm like, Emma, I want to write a book, but I feel writer's block, like year after year. But I didn't stop writing. I was still writing poems. I was still, writing scenes, whatever. And there was a essay I wrote in I took a lot of creative writing classes in college. And one of the essays I wrote was called The Thinnest Line. And so it was a play on words of the finish line. And it was called The Thinnest Line. So that was my original idea. So the very first version of this entire book was called The Thinnest Line. And I used that, and I was in Hawaii sitting on a beach. So fast forward to like 2021, Feb of 2021, sitting on a beach, and all of a sudden, or 2022, all of a sudden I got this just like overwhelming flowing of chapter ideas. And so I just started writing them. I had in my phone, it was like, if you read my book, it's a lot of creative names for the chapter titles. And so I just started writing those. And that was about it. And I was like, okay, well, at least I have an outline. Like I have somewhere to begin. Got back from Hawaii. I got out of a pretty rough relationship, and I was like, okay, well, instead of crying myself to sleep every night, it took me back to like the hospital of like, I know what grounds me. It's writing. I'm going to come back. And so I took a chapter a night and said, okay, just write it. And I just write it. No edits, no nothing. Would just take the chapter title name, like My Brain on a Brownie, and then just write it out. And it wasn't in any linear order, which I think really helped me. It was just what chapter felt like present for me to come back to and write. And then it turned from one chapter to a ton of chapters to, at the peak of it, I was writing about 6 hours a day. I would finish a day of work, and then I'd write from 4 to 10, 4 to 11. I just stay at the coffee shop, put my headphones in, and just write and cry and heal. And it was pretty cathartic. It felt like an overflowing of words.
Wow.
And just like this, like, man, I can't write. And then it just poured out of me. So that's a bit about kind of the writing process, and it's gone through multiple rounds of revisions. But the reason why I renamed it was my first editor. So I've had a few editors, but my first editor, Babette, incredible human, she was like, I like the creativity of this name, but it doesn't give credence to the depth of this book. It's not just about thin, like it's so much more than that. And that's really my goal with this, is like, eating disorders aren't about thinness, even though it might seem like that, it's not. And it also was like, she's like, this is so much more than just your eating disorder. Like, it's finding your worth. It's all that. So we did a word cloud, and I just put in like words that I was like, what pulls out or resonates. And then we worked on the title a bit and came up with this title. And it just finally, I was like, oh, beyond my body for me is like, your body and your relationship with your body is so important. It is everything, right? And it's not about what your body looks like. It's finding that purpose and that worth outside your body, and using that body as like, you and your body are a team. And how can you also use your body to feel empowered, to feel strong, speak kindly to your body, but your purpose is not invested in how thin your body is, or what your body looks like, or the praises you receive about it. Your purpose is so much bigger than that. And it's about who you are at your core. And I truly think like our bodies are just a vessel for that core of who you are to shine.
That's such a beautiful sentiment, because it definitely comes across in the book. And I'll admit that the book was very challenging for me to read on multiple levels. And I'll kind of go through like what the levels were for me, right? So like on one level, it was challenging because I didn't realize how much I took advantage of, like how much I did not think about. I don't think about, like, when I walk by my mirror, I usually look and I say like, yeah, you look good. Like, it never occurred to me that someone would have a relationship. And again, it just goes to show you like the different experiences, right? Of having that difficulty of looking into a mirror. Traveling. I love to travel. And it never once occurred to me that, and the way you discussed it in the book, where it's like, holy smokes, traveling is really chaotic, in terms of like, again, you talked about where your meal's going to come from, how are you going to get your workouts in, how are you going to do all that stuff. And it was just little things like that I realized, oh, I don't even think about it. I don't worry about it. If anything, I see those, for you, what are big challenges or were big challenges, I see them as opportunities to explore, right? I'm like, oh, new country, we get to go and explore different restaurants. But the way you wrote about it, it just gave me a perspective that I would never have. Like, I would have never had I not read your words. So that was one layer of me realizing just how much I take for granted, things like that, how much it just doesn't take up space in my mind. And on another level, it was, I'm a mother, and I'm a mother of at this point, we're recording a 13 and 11-year-old, two girls. And as I'm reading your story, you start off with talking about, I think what shocked me the most was how it went in such a short time period.
Yeah.
You went from not having an eating disorder to having one that led to a hospitalization. And that really, again, like as a mother, that one really shocked me, because again, my daughters are 13 and 11 years old. They're very much so in bodies that are changing. They're, just exposed to media, or just, there's so much that they're taking in that I'm just not aware of. And that struck me as well, of how quickly things can change, and then how drastically they can change. And again, for me, it was really hard to read that as a person walking through life, not thinking about, or not, I guess, being aware of the things that you've had to be aware of. But now also because of your words, having a heightened awareness when it comes to my own daughters. And
Mm,
I'm curious, when you were writing this book, who were you writing it for?
oh, I love that. And I love all you touched on. I didn't thank you for sharing. And like totally, I give the fair warning of like it is a pretty raw and honest memoir. And it is vignette style. So it's a bunch of short stories that they all live on their own, but they make up a big story, and it's 5 parts. And part 1 kind of goes into, as you mentioned, earlier stages and growing up and different things that we consume and don't understand. The first chapter is called Fitting Through Doors. And my dad used to always tell me growing up, hey, don't eat that or you won't fit through the door. And it was like, he's a very joking and funny man. And he thought it was a joke. But for me, it wasn't. And so it's just that part is kind of just those experiences. Part 2 talks about just some early stages with sexual trauma and understanding like bodies in a very, very early age and not feeling ownership over my body. And then that was a big reason for getting into the eating disorder. And then part 3 is like hospital, whatnot. And part 4 is starting to get into recovery. And part 5 is really finding that expansion. So I didn't mention earlier, so I want to touch on that. And I love how you kind of pull different themes of like, oh, I didn't realize like traveling or mirrors. It's like things that we don't really even think about. But to your original question of who was I writing it for? I think it's multifaceted. It's not just one. In the truth of, at the end of the day, if no one read this book, not a single person, which there's people that have already read it, so that's not the case. But if not a single person read this book, I wrote it for my 17-year-old self. I wrote it for her that it was like, I wanted to tell her things and explain things to her that people weren't telling her. It was, what did she need to hear that she didn't hear? And also it was just trying to make sense of what the hell just happened? Like, what the hell is happening? So for me, it was really, truly writing it for myself. And I think because of that, well, yes, I have dreams of people reading this and resonating it and like hearing different people's reactions because they're across the board. But at the end of the day, I wrote it for myself. I think the other parts of who I wrote it for young females, and there are males too, for sure. It touches a lot more on the female experience, but I wrote it for young women to understand like, hey, I understand where you've been, and maybe it doesn't have to go to an eating disorder, or maybe there's other things you're dealing with, depression, anxiety, but just for them to feel seen and heard in ways that I didn't feel seen and heard. And then I think the other key audience, there's definitely, like therapists and coaches and people that could use this as a resource that maybe don't experience it, but they might be working with someone like college coaches that might be working with college runners or whatnot. But the other perspective really truly is like parents and caregivers. I had a friend reach out and was like, hey, my daughter was experiencing something, like now I understand what was going through her mind after reading your book. And maybe not the exact same, but like I can get it. And so my goal is just like trying to put language to these things that seem so trivial at times, like just eat the food, just stop working out. And it's like, it's not that easy. It's actually really freaking hard. And eating disorders, I'm biased, but I think they're one of the hardest disorders to recover from, because what is your greatest enemy is also the thing you need to recover and survive. We all need food. We ideally all need to some capacity move our bodies, but you're so afraid of eating or do not have a good relationship with food, but you have to confront your demon at minimum 3 times a day. 3 times a day. I am not discounting any other mental disorders, but like for alcoholism, like, you can just not go to a bar. It's still extremely hard. I am not discounting that. I think I just want to paint the picture of like what you have to do in order to recover is facing your demon. Like you go for a run, well, you still have to face that demon of like, okay, I have to control myself so that I don't go for a run because I want to burn calories or go overdo it or go on this spinning of compulsive exercise. Like there's so many things that it's just in the forefront. How much we talk about food, how much we talk about exercise, diet culture, it's everywhere. So it's just one, I think, and that's why I think recovery takes really long. And also I think it's really easy to go from disordered eating to an eating disorder. And that's where, you know, I really just want to put language and just humanize eating disorders, because I don't think that they're really understood.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they're definitely not understood, right? So I'll share for myself personally, right? When I found out I was pregnant for the first time, and I found out that it was a girl, I went down not a very in-depth path, but I went down the path of researching eating disorders and trying to figure out what are some of the protective factors for my daughters. Like, what are things that I can do for them? And one of the things that came up was communal meal times, and just like that's a protective factor, making sure the family shares all their meals together. Now, obviously not all of them, because kids are in school and all that stuff, but dinner time in my household is everyone's together. There's no phones, and it has been that way for as long as I have been a mother. And that's just like, I feel like that's not even the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these protective factors. And that was something, again, reading your book. And again, I have another curiosity for you, because in reading your book, you personified your eating disorder, right? It was, I didn't know, I'm like, does she want us to say ED, or does she want us to call it ED? Like, what's the name here? But either way, you personified it. Eating disorder is capitalized in your book. And that was something that, again, it really struck me, because you portrayed that as a relationship, right? And there's, at some point in the book, you even say how others were jealous of your relationship with your eating disorder, and how, yes, you love your family, but you love the eating disorder more. What, I guess, can you walk us through that? I mean, like, I know that's a really big topic, but to think about it, because we usually think, like, not usually, but I feel like oftentimes the dialogue is that you cannot control the compulsion. Like, if you can just control it, you can get, you can be okay. But the way you described it, it's very much so, this is a relationship.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you don't have control, because the story that this eating disorder, the story that's coming out of this relationship, is one that very much so strips you of your, just of your, and here you even said it in the book, right? Where it's the lack of willpower. So it seems like it's something that strips you of that. Again, how did you come to describing it that way? Because again, I felt like you did that so beautifully in the book, where I really understood this isn't just an addiction. It isn't a just get over it, go recover. It is something that is an everyday, every moment interaction and decision.
Totally. I'm really glad you got that takeaway from it, because I think I want to touch on a few things, and can definitely share some resources after, when it comes to like the neuroscience. But it literally is, your brain is altered. Like, just like depression and anxiety, there is a genetic component of eating disorders, and that's why a lot of people that might go into dieting or disordered eating don't get a full-blown on eating disorder. But the aspect of it, of like, the reason why I even personify is because it is a person, like, it is me and Ed. And we were always like, for a while there, we were on the same team, because I just turned my life to like completely bow down to this part of my brain. And it was, my brain is so altered, like literally the neural pathways, any stimulus that I felt, whether that was starting out too, was like, okay, you're anxious, go runner control with food. Okay, you want to get strong, go work out for 5 hours. And oh, you want to go be exceptional, whatever. It was just this, everything I did or wanted to be was just this story and these thoughts in my head from this person. So another aspect of why I personify it, and the voice of Ed is now the chapter now, but it used to be called Men to a Man Named Ed. We changed it a bit, but for me too, it was that trying to reclaim power over my body. I'm not going to get into it in detail, but I had early stages of sexual intimacy that was not welcomed at 12 years old. And from that moment, I was like, I don't have power over my body. Like, my body's not mine. My body is for a man, and whatever he wants to do with it, it's his control. And for me, it first started like getting really into fitness and controlling, like it's a control mechanism. And I was like, oh, this is going to give me my power back. This is going to give me my control back. A big part of it was I wanted to lose. I matured super early, and I was like, I need to lose my chest. Like, I cannot have boobs because I don't want to be wanted. I want to have control, and I wanted to just be me. And so quickly it turned into another obsession and just this full blown on of like, he then, and that's why I personified it, is like Ed took control. And the reason also is like, as you get into recovery, there's things that we talk about of like Ed mind and wise mind. Like, you are your wise mind. So it's okay, I feel stressed, I'm going to go for a 10-mile run. That's what Ed says. But you say, no, I'm stressed. How about I take some deep breaths? Maybe I can still go for a run, but does it have to be 10 miles? Why is it that? And that's just one example, but it really is like your thoughts are so consumed. And the more and more I got into recovery, the more I recognized like that voice actually isn't mine. And it was so hard to differentiate though, because it just felt so like, oh no, this is me. And this is my way to reclaim my power. This is my way to get healthy. And I realized it was the complete opposite. And I didn't have willpower. Instead, I just was dedicated to this addiction and this completely false sense of control. And I do have to say though, like, the coping mechanisms served for some time, but they're not sustainable. And really trying to relearn, like, how do I still move my body in a way that is a sustainable coping mechanism, not a coping mechanism that's an addiction? Or how do I fill my body with a balanced meal that is serving me, and all those things. So all in all to say is, I really wanted to personify it. One, because I think it helps to give that humanization, but two, because that's literally my experience of it was being in a relationship with this man. And one of the later chapters is Dear Ed, and it's my like goodbye letter to him. And I don't feel like it was, I feel like, there's been little bumps along the road, but honestly, since then it was like, all right, like, I'm just sick and tired of you. Like, stop controlling my life. I want to be in control. I don't want you in control anymore.
And I think that makes sense, right? Because again, like, viewing your book, having read your book, the whole relationship piece, and you just mentioned bumps in the road, right? That's how relationships are, right? Like, relationships have bumps in the road, and relationships are about figuring out those boundaries and really understanding, is this me thinking this, or is this you thinking this? And to me, it was just so, that was really, really impactful, because it impacted. I mean, it was an impactful because it impacted. Okay, great use of words, Steph. But it was just, you showed it in a way, or you wrote about it in a way that, again, I feel like it's so quick and easy for mainstream culture and life to dismiss this. And I wanted to share a quote, if you're okay with me reading verbatim, because this is one of the quotes that really, it just stood out to me. And I was like, oh, this is the problem with our society, and then all the messaging we get. But It's from your journal. It's one of the words from one of your journal entries. And it goes as follows. It sucks having to gain weight in a world where everyone is fixated on losing it. I just have to remind myself that health is so much more important than vanity. And that one, again, going back to what I said earlier that you also shared in the book about how others were jealous of how healthy you are, and that's what Ed was telling you. Ed was telling you you had to earn. There were things in there that you shared that it just really helped me see the compulsion behind it and how much of a struggle it is, and it was for you to find yourself and find your worth in the midst of a voice telling you that you have to do more to be enough.
Yeah.
That really, I mean, there was so much of this, and even you shared about being the best at having an eating disorder and being the best at recovery. And it's just the idea of being the best. So I'm curious, how did you go from feeling like you need to be the best to giving yourself the grace to simply be enough?
Oh, I have goosebumps. Yes. Thank you for sharing that quote. And I think, that quote is prevalent always, and now more than ever. I'm as an intuitive eating coach and eating disorder recovery coach, like really practice health at every size, because weight is not an indicator of health. Sure, it's a component, but it is not the number one. And it's absurd how much we have just focused on this thing. And, I think to add on like the exceptional, and early on, like since I've been born, I was like, I have to be exceptional. I have to be the best. It was just, and my parents would be like, Allison, get a B. Like I got 1 A- my entire life and I cried for 3 weeks. And I just had this like compulsion of like, I have to be, if I am not exceptional, I am not worthy. And Ed, for the first time, in air quotes, I was obviously worthy before, but felt, because of all the praises, there's a chapter called Praises from the Gym. And people be like, oh my God, you're such an animal. Look at you go work out. Like, oh my God, you ran these things, like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, let's go. So it just adds fuel to the fire. It's like, why would you want to break up with something that people are like, yes, this is incredible. It's like, you see this perfect relationship on Instagram. You're like, you guys are the best. Like, you're so in love. But little do you know, behind the scenes, it's one of the most toxic and abusive relationships that you've been in. And that's what it felt like. It was like all of these people being like, you're incredible. Like, you are Wonder Woman. Look at your body. You're so dedicated. I was like, finally, I am the best at something. And then I realized it's the farthest thing from the best. I was like, one of the lines too, I talk about how when my doctor was like, I think you have anorexia. And I was like, hell no. You guys are all just jealous that I'm the healthiest person in the room. And I actually was the farthest thing from health. I had a week left to live. And I think circling back to that original question of, how did I get to starting to understand my worth? I think a ton of little baby steps along the way. It was a lot of just like slowly pulling away and slowly learning my worth is not in this man. But I think what really was a really big shifting point for me was about 3 years ago. I started working with this therapist who I'm still with. She's incredible. And she asked me, I was in a pretty dark place. And she was like, hey, what do you like about yourself? And I was like, honestly, right now, I don't know. I really don't know. And she's like, well, like, what do people say? And all I listed was like, I'm good at my job and I teach yoga and I had a good GPA, whatever. She's like, what this is all sounding to me is like icing. You have this cake, but all I'm hearing from you is that the way that you're defining your worth is icing. And then she paused. She goes, can I ask you something? I was like, sure. She goes, how did your eating disorder make you feel? And I was like, exceptional. And I started to finally realize that my eating disorder was my icing. And it was the prettiest icing of them all, is what I thought. And I finally just started, she goes, well, what's your cake? And I'm like, I don't know. And I just broke down. I was like, what is my, like, I don't know who I am. I know all these things that I do that on the outside make me look exceptional, but I feel like absolute shit inside, absolute trash. And I don't know who I am. I don't know what my worth is. And I think the other thing too, at that point along in my recovery, I was really starting to not use behaviors. I was pretty far along, I would say, in my recovery journey. And that was also hard because I didn't have Ed now to define me for being exceptional. That used to be my marker. It was like, oh, my friends are going out for the night. I'm not going in. I'm going to go run my 20 miles in the morning. They're like, oh my God, you're incredible. I'm like, yeah, but I actually want to be out with you all. I want to go get that sushi. I want to go like do those things. I want to wake up and just get coffee and not go for my 20-mile run. And I think that was like a really shifting point in my mind of like, okay, now it's time to just sit and figure out who the hell I am. And I think that's where a lot of that just like human experience, like we've all been there and we all still there of like, what makes me worthy? And that's where I started off this conversation of like, what makes me worthy on the inside is like my laughter, my ability to bring people together, building community, my ability to make people feel seen and heard and loved and know that they are freaking enough as they are. And it's definitely taken many years and it's still a constant reclamation and a constant coming back. But to summarize kind of all of that, it was just understanding that my worth is not because I'm exceptional. I was born with inherent worth, and we all are born with inherent worth. It's that core, just who we are as a human being is worthy. You can have all these things, you can do all these things, but at the end of the day, just who you freaking are, that is worthy. So it's taken a long time to get there, but yeah, it's just trying to let go of that being exceptional, but still comes back often, but it's just kind of checking yourself all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, that's part of being a human, is that we're constantly having to recalibrate. We're having to change. We're having to integrate new information, new stories, check our old stories. And it's really hard, right? Because there's not an end point. Like even every time you've mentioned your recovery, you say my recovery journey, because there is no end point to it. And in the book, you talk about that as well, in terms of living in a world that is full of all your triggers. And going back to what I shared when we first started talking, of not even realizing that, right? Like this is so silly, but I thought about it in your book, in relation to your book, but there's a new cookie shop that's opening up on Friday, and I cannot wait to go. I have been holding myself back from buying the cookies because I want to go on their grand opening day to support them. Like since Monday, I've been saying I'm going to go get these cookies. And I could have gotten the cookies, but even then, like, I'm so looking forward to getting the cookies. I'm probably going to get 24 cookies just to be extra.
I love it.
But I contrast that to the stories you tell in your book about eating a brownie, and how the brownie, and it broke my heart because, again, you shared how they had to prepare you to just look at the brownie, how someone had to sit with you to help you eat the brownie. And here, again, the contrast was, the only reason I've held myself back from getting the cookie is because I want to go on their grand opening day, right? Like I want to show up. I want to support them on the day that they're doing something new. And here, that just even thinking of that, or even thinking of existing on social media right now, when people share their meals, or people share what they're eating, not eating, drinking, not drinking. So this whole idea of triggers, again, that that blindness that I had because I have no experience with this. So if there's anyone that's listening and has been listening to our conversation, what do you tell them when it comes to navigating a world that is full of triggers? Because you've learned a lot, you're still learning. But yeah, because I've got nothing to give people. I've literally been counting down the days to a cookies grand opening. So
Yeah.
like, but for you, what are the words that you would share with others?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so excited for you to get these cookies. Sounds
So
delicious.
excited.
I'd be joining you too. And yeah, so the brain and the brownie and a lot of the things that we're seeing. So when I say complex eating disorder, it was anorexia, orthorexia, and exercise addiction, or also known as compulsive exercise. And a lot of what you just said really resonates with what we're seeing. A lot of it is that orthorexia or orthorexic trends. And for those who aren't familiar, orthorexia is like this obsession with clean eating, with being super healthy, with following the latest trends, paleo, keto, whatever. And you see that everywhere. Go gluten-free, go do this. Don't get me wrong, there's medical needs. I totally get that. But we're in this state of just comparison of like, oh, well, this is what I eat in a day, and this is what you should eat. And like, try this latest trend, try this green juice, try whatever. And that's why I think, disordered eating is even on the rise, is because it's just this game of comparison. And so I think there's multiple things that, you can do if you're experiencing it, but also I think I want to touch on the side of like, how do you be a person of not engaging in that, or not, adding to this mess of diet culture? And so for that aspect, I'll start there, and then I'll go if you are experiencing things to think about or resources. But it's like recognizing that, sure, we can talk about food, why we love food, eating it, but there's no need to post your amount of calories. Every single body is different. There's a theory called set point theory, which basically states that each unique individual has a range of ideally where their body wants to fall in. And that changes as you grow, puberty, whatever. But set point theory is really about like, you and I could do the exact same exercise. We could do the exact same, eat the exact same things, and our bodies are going to look drastically different, drastically. And so these ideas of like, do this to look this way, or do this to do whatever, we need to stop. I'm just going to say blanket out. Like, we need to stop. Food is a celebration. Yes, it fuels our body. Yes, it gives us energy. And starting to rewrite the way we talk about food, the way we talk about movement. The reason why I shift from using fitness to movement is because movement can be anything. It can be going for a walk. It can be dancing in your kitchen. I'm not the best dancer, but I love to dance. Like, movement can be what you want to make it to be, that makes you feel good. If you hate running, I'm a run coach, I'm a runner. If you hate running, honestly, I'm going to say don't run. Sure, maybe you want to try it. There is a balance of getting out of your comfort zone. I totally get that. But like, don't say that everyone needs to do this exercise or eat this meal plan. So all in all to say is just be conscious of what you're putting out there when it comes to like your own lifestyle and the language you're using around it. There's a lot I could go down on that path, but I'll keep it short and sweet for that one. And I think the other area is just notice the way you talk to others about their bodies, and also just don't comment on body. There's just not a need. Like, tell someone like, I love your energy, or like, you look strong. That's fine. But like, there's just so much fixation on what we look like.
Yeah.
And so if someone is like, wow, you look so healthy. Well, what if I gain weight, or what if I lose weight? Do I not look healthy anymore? Like, there's just this balance of, and just no need to like comment on bodies or comment on people's foods. And a lot of my clients, we work through that of like, how do you set boundaries with friends and family for them to not comment on those things? Or so all I'm all to say is notice what you're putting out, and then also notice like the way that you're commenting on people's food or bodies. And then also the way you speak to yourself, especially, I will have to say, I love my parents. They know they're in the book. We've had multiple conversations, multiple therapy, but if you do have children or anything, it's just like, be conscious of the way that you speak about your body, not only for your children, but also for you. Like my mom still to this day comments on her elephant arms. And I'm like, every time she does that, I want to slap her across the face and be like, no, like your arms are beautiful. They give me the best hugs. They're not elephant arms. They give me the best hugs. And so just notice the way that you're speaking about your body, because even though it might not be a direct relationship, like there are people probably listening to those messages, and also you internalize those. So that's what I would say for that end. And then if you are experiencing disordered eating or eating disorders, like there is so much help from a just setting yourself up for success. Notice what people you follow on social, unfollow them. If they are posting things that, if you feel anxious when you see a post, or it sends you down a spiral of, oh my God, this person posted their time and their run and blah, 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 blah. Now I feel like I have to go 50 miles. Like if it doesn't bother you, I'm not saying you have to unfollow, but if you notice a reaction and a train of thought after, declutter your social media. And say, if you can, boundary setting super helpful too with your friends, your family. You're not always going to be able to set those boundaries. Sometimes it can be really hard and really awkward and really scary. But if someone comments on something that you don't like you have every right to say, hey, how about we don't talk about food? I'd really love to learn about what excites you in your life right now, right? There's like ways to shift. Or right now in summertime, one of my favorite boundary setting, I love to make jokes of things in a lighthearted way. And if people are like, oh, I got to go get my summer body, I'm like, oh, really? Well, you have a body and it's summer. So I think you have your summer body. Like just little things that, it just checks people be like, wait, we sound ridiculous saying these things. It's okay to remove yourself too from situations that don't feel serving, or like say there's a friend, maybe you just step back a little bit, and that's okay. Really being protective of your space, your energy, and the things around you is super, super important. And then from support, like there's so many support groups. I have a lot and favorite, and there is, resources for parents. Feast is amazing. They are for parents and caregivers. They have Facebook groups. They have resources. Everything is free. ANAD is enough, ANAD, anorexia nervosa, and other diagnoses. They are an incredible organization. NIDA has incredible resources. Project Heal is amazing. They have a lot of free resources and talk a lot about like access to care, because that is really hard. Unfortunately, our medical system with insurance sometimes feel like you have to be sick enough to get care, and know that if you are struggling, there is no sick enough. If this is causing you distress, if you feel like you need care, you need care. And I'll plug myself. I take on clients. I work with them one-on-one. I'm down the line. I'll probably do some group sessions, but reach out to me. I'm happy to help you and support you. Even if you just want to chat, would love to do so. And just notice who you're surrounding yourself with. Like surround yourself with people that light you up, not bring you down, and make you feel good inside. So there's so many things we could touch on, but I feel like those are probably the big ones that I would give to someone.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if there's anyone that's listening to this and they're like, but I don't know how to establish a boundary, I highly, highly recommend Melissa Urban's book called The Book of Boundaries, because she gives you scripts, like very specific. In this situation, say this. In this situation, say that. So if you're someone who doesn't know what words to use, that book is excellent. I mean, it's again, like that was another hard read for me too, because I'm like, wait, she makes it seem so simple. But at the end of the day, the boundary is what helps keep you safe. And it's also what helps keep a relationship intact. If there's a boundary and that person respects it, you can continue to move forward. But if that person doesn't respect it, that is definitely a signal to you of this person, it maybe does not have my best interest in mind.
Yep.
I appreciate what you said about movement and shifting your language, because language is so important. And I know that's something I've shifted myself, kind of going back to what you shared. When people would say, and there's also generational things. So for those of you who don't know me in person, I'm a Latin woman, and Latin culture, for some reason, and I won't say all of them, but our older generations definitely have a lot to say about bodies, body types, and how much you're eating and all of that. And I had a few years ago, my grandmother, she hadn't seen me for a while. And the very first thing she said was, "Oh, Stephanie, you've gotten fatter." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And like, I mean, again, if you know me in person, I know in these conversations, I probably come off as like very chill, very cool, but I do have a temper. And I do know how to just like poke the bear continuously, because Schadenfreude, I just get pleasure sometimes out of really like just going at it. And that night, my grandmother at the end of the night told me to just stop talking because I was no longer being helpful. Well, because I kept telling her, "Oh, I love my body. My husband doesn't have a problem with my body. I can run marathons with this body." And I just kept on, kept on, kept on, kept on, kept on. And I told her, "You don't say this in front of my kids. You have no right to comment on my body in front of my kids." So now she no longer comments on my body, but that was something she would always say. That there was another instance where I had just given birth. I was probably 2 weeks postpartum. And when she saw me, the very first thing out of her mouth was, "Oh, you still look pregnant." And I'm like, "What? Like, I just had a baby."
You're like, it's been 2 weeks.
You're on. So the boundary setting is really important. And I just want to, I share those two stories to acknowledge the fact that like sometimes there's a really big cultural component to that, where
Totally.
you'll have older generations, they feel that they are entitled to comment on your body. And I know from my experiences, I've taken those interactions and I've really just sat with, how do I tell people?
Mm.
How do I speak to people about him? So now
Yeah.
I just like, if I notice that someone has physically changed, I'll say something like, "Wow, you're looking really strong. You're looking really fit." And even that one doesn't feel that great, like that you're looking fit, but it's kind of, I've gotten to that point of, let me just not say anything. Like,
Yes.
let me just not say anything, because what is this doing for anyone? And I think it highlights the fact that we really don't know what people are going through, and we
Yep.
don't know what journeys they're on. And if you tell someone they're looking skinnier or they're looking slender or any of that, and maybe it's because they're experiencing something traumatic in their life or they have an eating disorder, all of a sudden that is encouraging behavior that is not healthy, right? Like it's
Yeah.
encouraging behavior that's really not helpful.
Yeah.
So I love that you shift the movement, because I do that now. Again, the languaging piece, I say
Yeah.
movement modalities, like try different movement modalities, give running
Yes.
a try, give everything a try. I personally am a firm believer that we all have one movement modality that speaks to us and that brings us a lot of joy and a lot of fun. And it just takes curiosity in finding that.
Yeah.
So to kind of wrap up this conversation and bring us full circle, because this is Runner's Roundtable and we did connect with running. How did you go from running being a tool that reinforced Ed's voice to where you are now with running? Because that was something that, again, as I was reading your book and you share this story of how you were, when you were given permission to run, and then there is that internal struggle of not pushing too hard or not going too far or not doing that, because then you are feeding into Ed. So what has that looked like for you, going
Yeah.
from running as Ed's tool to running as something you've reclaimed for you?
Yes. I love this question. And I think I'm going to touch on something you said earlier to shift it back. But when you were talking about bodies and not commenting, and I think what feels really present for me there, and something that I continue to come back to with myself, with clients, with friends, with family, is, I don't love my best friend because of the shape of her body. And I don't love, like, the things I love about someone has nothing to do with the size or the shape of their body. I often say, like, your body is the least interesting, not important, it's the least interesting thing about you. And so for me, why that I'm saying that is because it ties directly into my relationship with running. When I was at like the height of my ed, it was like I was defining myself by how far I could run, how fast I could run, how many miles, how many people I could beat. It was like, people love me because I'm a runner. If I stop running, they're not going to like me anymore, was like the mentality around it. And what's really helped me kind of shift away from that obsession and that compulsion and the need to be the best and the need to go, which still comes there. Running, I think, has been the most ups and downs since. And I think the one truth that I hold on to is like, people don't love me because I'm a runner, and I don't love myself because I'm a runner. It's a huge part of who I am, but it doesn't define me. And I always come back to myself at 8 and 10 when I was running because I just loved it and it lit me up, and it's coming back to that. And I'll be transparent, I'm still trying to get back to that. As I mentioned, I work with coaches, which they're great, but like for me personally, it started to bring back some of those thoughts of like, okay, look at my speed, look at my watch. I was a girl that I never used a watch. I used Map My Run or sometimes nothing for literally until 2 years ago. And then I bought a watch for the first time. And that watch just like screwed me up. And so I think for me personally, it's like, I know my boundaries. My boundary with myself for running is I want running to be joyful. And I'm not running yet, but when I get back to running after hip surgery, and that also was a huge part of all of this too, reclaiming my relationship with running, is getting injured and having to come back from injury and realizing like, I want to go out with a night and dance with my friends. I want to go on that hike. And running, when it's in an unhealthy obsession for me, stops me from being able to do those things. So for me, it's looking at that big picture. It's realizing I want running to be a part of my life. I don't want it to be my life, and I don't want it to define me. My times will not define me. And just continuing to come back to that feeling of like, I love to feel my feet on the ground. I love to feel my breath in my lungs. I love to feel I have some of the best ideas and just thoughts about life when I'm on that run. I'm a crazy person. I don't listen to music when I run at all. I just let my head go. And yeah, so I think for me, it's just coming back to like why I run. And I often like ask my clients of like, why are you moving? And just check in with yourself. And that intentionality behind movement is so important. And if your why is your primary why, right? There's going to be multiple whys, but if your primary why is aesthetics or to burn calories or because you feel like you have to, I challenge you to not move that day. Not forever, not stop moving, but just, or maybe shift it. Maybe instead of, maybe you go for a gentle walk, or maybe you sit and read your book in a park. Just try it out, because the more and more we feed into that have to, the harder it is to come back to the because I genuinely want to, or because I genuinely get to. And that relationship with movement that is intuitive. And then I think the last piece is I wake up, and not as much because I have to do a lot of physical therapy right now. But I wake up and I'm like, how do I want to move my body today? And getting curious. And I totally get it. When you're training for a marathon, you're training for different things. Like I've been there. You can't do that as often, but if you need flexibility in your movement modalities, just your movement plan, like bring it in. That brings freedom. So taking away those have tos, understanding your intentionality, understanding your relationship with it. And it should be something that just like lights you up. So yeah, I feel like that is kind of how I've pulled away and starting to just regain and know like what are my boundaries, and that running is a part of me, but it's not all of me.
I love that. And I also find that really hard because
Yeah.
I feel like runners in general are known for being very structured, very type A, very
Yeah.
much like, this is the pace. I have to do this. I have to do that. And it's such a parallel for me of where I see running right now. Not everyone, but so focused on getting fast and your pace and doing all this stuff. And it is so parallel to everything you've shared about like having that much structure to it does take the joy out of it. And I think even, and I shared something earlier on Instagram about how everyone should have a run coach because of the accountability. So hearing what you're speaking, it has just made me wonder, how should run coaches interact with, say, an athlete like yourself then?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good question. And yeah, I want to caveat that the way I'm speaking about running is like, that's what I found to work for me. Some people really love the structure. And like, if it's not consuming you, by all means, go for it. Um, I think, and it is such that balance, but I often just remind myself and remind people like, we're not training for the Olympics. Like, we're not getting paid to do this. Running should be fun. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it sucks sometimes, but like at the end of the day, like this isn't our job and it should be something that we enjoy. So I just want to touch on that piece. But in regards to working with clients that, have maybe further along in their eating disorder recovery journey or disordered eating, or maybe they have a disordered relationship with movement. One is, especially if it's an eating disorder, you should not be the only person on the team. Please, please, please check to see that they have a therapist and a nutritionist. If you are not a nutritionist, do not give nutrition advice. I cannot emphasize that enough. Like, I know we talk about as coaches in our training, like staying in your lane, and it's important, but it's even more important with people that have had a past with eating disorders or disordered eating, because if they hear you say, oh, well, this is what I ate today, likely they're going to go do that. And so just knowing what your lane is, and knowing also, if you don't feel comfortable, it's totally okay to say, hey, that's a really good question. I don't feel comfortable right now giving you advice. However, here's some resources. If you don't know where to get resources, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. I will chat with you. But there are lots of resources out there. Or maybe you're like, hey, I'm not the right fit for you. And that's okay. There are run coaches out there like myself, Sarah Hayes. She's awesome. She's a Health at Every Size run coach. There are so many run coaches out there that, are in this field. So don't feel the pressure that you have to take someone on if you don't feel comfortable. It's much better to set that boundary up, not only for the person, but also for you.
Yeah.
And make sure that they're with someone that does feel successful. So that's all in all to say. But like, if you are working with someone, maybe for one of my clients that was further along, I would ask her like, hey, before you go for your run, I want you to journal your why and final surge and let me know. Or, let's check in on different things. We spent most of our coaching calls talking about the mentality and the mental health side of running versus then like her pace. Always asking after a run, how did this make you feel? How do you feel? Not like what your paces were. I never commented really on like times. I was like, awesome. Like, how'd you feel? Like, how's your mindset? What's that like? Really taking it away from the time, from the pressure, to just like, giving that more, focusing on like, how did it make them feel in their body and whatnot. And then I think the other piece too is, if this is something that they want. One of my other athletes just had an interesting relationship with movement from being across country and whatnot. And we just put a lot of flexibility into our plan. So for her, while it was a bit out of my comfort zone, I was like, hey, I get it. She was like, I don't want structure. Give me my long run and give me like what miles you want me to get to during the week. And like, I did one speed workout and one long run. And then I was like, okay, but ideally, because she was training for half marathon, like 16 miles or whatever it was that week. And you can break it up as you want, but you now have flexibility. You have 2 days that are planned, but now you have flexibility. So just being curious, knowing it's not a one size fits all, really understanding your athlete, really getting to know them on a personal level, and then knowing that you don't have to do it alone. Have RDs in your circle, have therapists or people in your circle that you think you could refer to. Stay in your lane and refer out when you need to, please, please, please. But yeah, just really making sure, that you don't have to do it alone. And just getting to know your athletes, I think, is my biggest piece of advice, and meeting them where they are at, not where you think that they should be.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's not about you, it's them.
Yep.
right? Like as the
100%.
run coach, it's not me, it's you.
Yes.
And I would hope that run coaches, all of them, I'm going to say all of them, have their athletes, like their athletes' best interest in mind,
Yeah.
that they're there to empower their athletes, to help them reach their goals in a way that is safe. And I have such a soft spot for a soft spot or a TED Talk box. I don't even know how you want to call it, but of the idea of just stay in your lane. Like, don't stay in your lane because, and maybe this is wrong of me to say, but I find that people who have difficulty staying in their lanes, they have some kind of insecurity themselves that they're not enough for the people that they're serving. And it's like, but you are, like, people are coming to you because you are a run coach, because you have an understanding of running and
Yes.
coaching people to run. They're not
Yes.
coming to you because you're a physical therapist, because you're a mental health therapist, because you're a nutritionist. I know for myself, with anyone that I talk to, I'm always like, this is what works for me.
Yep.
As your coach, like if they ask me, what do you do? I'll tell them, but I'll always tell them, this is what works for me. This is why you're doing the training, so that you can experiment with
Yep.
what works for you.
Exactly.
And even to what you said about that, that one client where you just gave the overall mileage, that is, in my opinion, the perfect example of what a run coach should do. The run coach should meet their athlete wherever they are and work with that person in specific. Otherwise, I don't want to say this, but like, otherwise, if you're not going to be able to meet people and work with them as they are, then just let them go and let them find a generic plan on the internet, right? Like if you're not going to invest in that relationship as well, these are, and I guess it's just to your point of running or any movement that you do, that is stuff that is extra to life. So if you're going to add it to your life, make sure you're adding decent people along with it, right? Like add the people who are going to help you shine the brightest.
Yes.
And not detract from it. So I
Yeah.
really, really, really appreciate that answer, because we are all on our own journeys and we're all trying to figure out how to be the best with the experiences and the life circumstances that hit us. So I really appreciate that. All right. Tell us where we can find you. Where can we
Yes.
connect with you? Give us all the information about the book, and yeah, let us know
Yes.
the good stuff.
Yes. The book is launching not today, but ideally the day that we're going to be putting this out, October 10th, World Mental Health Day. You can buy it on Amazon in ebook, Kindle, and hardback. It'll likely be in bookstores soon, but starting out, you can get it on Amazon. You can find the links. My website is allyrae.co. I have links there, and you can find it all the information there, especially if you want to work with me one-on-one or you just want to chat more. Find me there. You can also find me on Instagram, Ally Rae Pesta. So my exact name, that's it. You can find me there to connect, share. And then I'm also on TikTok at Ally Rae_co. So Ally Rae Co is the theme, or Ally Rae Pesta. But would love to connect with any of you. Ideally, would love for you to buy the book. If you do, please leave a review, and also let me know what you like, what you don't like. And if you have similar stories or just want to chat, I'm here for it. So super excited. And I really appreciate you all for listening. And Stephanie, thank you for having me again. I really appreciate it.
Listen, talking to you is always so delightful, because I feel like I leave my conversations with you just more knowledgeable and more aware. And that is my hope for everyone who listens to any of the podcast episodes, or whoever comes and takes a class with me, or who is coached by me. It's that hope that you are leaving interactions with me feeling better. And that's how I feel about you. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for talking to us about your book and how running is something that's been weaved throughout all of that. And even just sharing, I feel like that was bonus content there at the end of like,
Yes.
what kind of run coach should I go to then? Like, what are things I should consider? Because that is really important, especially now that more and more people and more regular people, quote unquote, regular people, are hiring run coaches. And there is a coach for every person.
Yes.
You don't have to settle, people. You don't have
Yes.
to settle. So
Yes.
find the coach that matches what your needs are and your desires are. And yeah, so Ally Rae, thank you so much. Thank you. Just thank you for being here, for sharing your words with all of us, and for truly gifting us with a book that, while it was challenging to read, opened my eyes in a way that I don't think they would have ever been opened before. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to read and for just creating such incredible dialogue and conversation. And so grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.